Chapter 18. James. It was 2 days before Christmas Eve, and I had more work than ever. Even though I wasn't playing point on either of the weddings planned for the big day, I still had to help out behind the scenes. One of our technical assistants had quit, and I had to scramble to replace him in time. We needed at least 4 people per event, in addition to the 2 I wanted for Alice's last activity. It wasn't just setting up the venue and transporting all the goods, but staging each party beforehand so that the day of, we would be ready to go. I hopped on the phone with at least a dozen people to iron out last-minute details. Before I knew it, the entire day was over, and I was forced to call it quits. Luckily, there wasn't anything planned at Alice's office. She and her staff were running themselves ragged, trying to get last-minute packages into the hands of children and families everywhere. I didn't know enough about the logistics business to know when the cutoff was, but it seemed reasonable to assume that the deadline was fast approaching. I was going through a mourning phase, which was ridiculous because I hadn't felt like Alice and I had ever been back together. But I knew enough about the process to recognize it. I could go long stretches without thinking about her, but when it hit me, it always hurt. I knew that eventually I would get used to the idea that we were never going to be together. But in those difficult moments, I couldn't understand why. At least I had the shelter's Christmas party that night to take my mind off her. There wasn't anything quite like doing a good deed for someone else to lift your spirits. I was too focused on myself, on my business, and my lack of companion. It was time to get out of my head and give someone else's life a boost. I meant to go shopping and get some more gifts for the residents, but with all the hustle and bustle of the holiday season, I forgot. It was still early enough to stop at a department store, so I grabbed a chicken sandwich from a drive-thru and pulled into the nearest mall. Without spending too much time contemplating the pros and cons of various gifts, I filled a cart. Luckily, there were some volunteer gift wrappers near the register. I stuck a 20 in their jar and waited as they wrapped all the presents. "What are we supporting today?" I asked. "It's a reading initiative," a teenager responded, handing me a brochure. "We have volunteers who go into schools and help children learn to read." I glanced at the brochure with a full-color picture, a portrait of a young boy with chubby cheeks sitting at a desk with a book in front of him. "Did you know that if children can't read by 3rd grade, they're more likely to drop out of school?" the girl asked as she punched a button on the tape dispenser. "I did not know that," I said. "Here you go." She handed me back the presents, nicely wrapped and snuggled in bows and ribbons. I fitted them back into the plastic bags given to me at the register. "Merry Christmas," I said, walking out the door. In the parking lot, I deposited the fresh gifts in the trunk and sat down to finish my sandwich. I was sure there would be food at the party, but I was hungry, and I didn't want my energy level to suffer. I could still sample whatever amazing dish the other volunteers came up with without having to drop everything. The thought of Alice snuck up on me again, and I sighed. Fitting my key into the ignition, I took off. It was really too painful to dwell on the subject, and I didn't want to focus on what I was missing. It was about a 10-minute drive from the mall to the shelter, and the whole way, I couldn't help but wish things were different. At least I was going to make other people happy that night. Pulling into the parking lot, I got out of the car, straightened my shirt, and retrieved the bags from the trunk. The door was open to allow volunteers and family members to come and go. There were at least 3 dozen people in the cafeteria, some decorating tables, some relaxing and having a good time. I found the Christmas tree that I had sent over. It was fully decorated and established in the waiting area. Kneeling beside it, I pulled the new gifts out of my bag, distributing them around the skirt. Standing back to admire the view, I was joined by a group of children. "Presents!" one girl shouted. "I want this one." A little boy zeroed in on a particular box wrapped in cartoon character paper. "You have to wait until Christmas," I instructed. "Why?" "Because those are the rules," the girl informed him. "Did you know Santa is coming?" Another child tugged at my shirt. "No." I acted surprised, dropping down to my knees again so that I could engage with him. "Who told you that?" "Mr. Pennington," the child named the shelter's manager. "He said Santa would be here after dinner." "Then I guess that means Santa will be here," I agreed with a smile. "Mr. Pennington knows Santa from way back." "Really?" The older kids crowded around. "He's just a fat guy in a suit," one child sneered. "Hey," I objected. "Santa's real." "Whatever." The disgruntled child walked away, taking his snide comments elsewhere. "Have you seen Santa?" a little girl asked. "Once, when I was your age," I told her. "What was he like?" Jolly, I said with a wink. Hey there, Mr. Garrett. Mr. Pennington arrived in the lobby, offering his hand. I got to my feet, brushing my knees off. Call me James. Sure thing, the shelter manager responded easily. I'm so glad you could come. I wouldn't miss it. Your lady friend is here, too, Pennington announced. What? I couldn't contain my surprise. The only person he could be referring to was Alice. Of course, she had received the invitation, too. I shouldn't have been so surprised to find that she followed through. Surprise didn't even cover it. I was happy that she had chosen to take time out of her busy day to spend with the shelter families. She could have easily decided she couldn't spare 1 extra minute, and no one would have blamed her. I wondered if I should seek her out or just go about my business. But the thought of playing it cool gave me indigestion. Why was I second-guessing myself? If Pennington considered us close enough to let me know she was there, I was going to at least say hi. Where is she? I asked. In the kitchen, he responded. She's helping the ladies from our Mission of Mercy. Thanks. I began to walk away, grinning as the children circled their shelter manager with excited questions. Did you see there are more presents? When is Santa coming? Did Santa bring these presents? I ducked out of the foyer and through the cafeteria, laughing to myself. With all the craziness going on in the world, a child's love for Christmas seemed like the only remedy. If only we could all be that innocent. Alice was elbow deep in a coffee urn when I found her, scrubbing the sides. She stood opposite the sink as some other women removed tinfoil from sheets of lasagna and stirred massive bowls of salad. There was turkey and stuffing already sliced and simmering in gravy, and a colorful vegetable casserole for anyone who didn't want meat. Alice wore her work clothes with bright yellow rubber gloves. She had a scouring pad in one hand and was scrubbing the coffee urn to death, focused on her task as if it required the utmost skill. I managed to get all the way across the room and position myself right in front of her before she looked up. Shock registered on her face, but then it dissolved into contentment. Her smile was genuine when she met my eyes. James, she said. You're on coffee duty? I asked. Well, I'm cleaning the pots so that we can make some after dinner, she responded. How long have you been here? About a half hour. She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear with one rubber finger. How about you? I just got here, I replied, leaning forward conspiratorially. I bought some more presents. That was nice of you. She resumed her chore, swirling the scouring pad around the bottom. Would you like some help? I asked. I think I got it, she replied. Here, one of the church ladies stuck a serving spoon in my hand. If you want to help, take the lasagna up front. I gave Alice a long-suffering grin, and she laughed. For once, there was nothing strange between us. We weren't fighting with each other, but enjoying the ambience of the place. I tucked the serving spoon into the lasagna, scooping the pan up and delivering it to the cafeteria. They were beginning to set up the buffet table, and my dish was one of the first to be arranged. Another legion of charity workers was buzzing around the cafeteria, straightening the tablecloths, putting out silverware, stacking buffet plates. I slid the lasagna into the center of the action, almost knocking over poinsettia. You know these are poisonous, I said to no one in particular. Alice came out from the kitchen, carrying her newly cleaned coffee urn. She set it at the end of the table and looked around for a plug. What's poisonous? Poinsettia. Really? She spied an outlet and stooped to connect the cord. Having accomplished that, she joined me in the center of the buffet table. I guess we should move it. Indeed, I agreed, picking the thing up. We went back into the kitchen together, and I set the offending plant down near the door, as far from cooking surfaces as I could manage. The volunteers loaded me up with more food to take out, and Alice went to the sink to retrieve the other pieces to the coffee maker. I spared one last glance at her way before backing out the door. Bit by bit, I populated the buffet table until the offerings were plenty and the dinner was ready to start. A few other folks from Alice's office arrived, including Todd and Marcy. They each brought something with them. Todd brought several packages of dinner rolls, and Marcy brought a tray of cupcakes. It's time to eat, Mr. Pennington announced. The children were the first in the buffet line, and even though both Alice and I offered to help serve, the ladies from the church wouldn't hear of it. Sit down and eat with the rest of the folk, one woman said. You deserve it. You might make a new friend, another lady replied. I looked over at Alice, thinking that there was only one friend I was interested in making that night. She glanced back at me, and I could have sworn she was thinking the same thing. We waited until all the homeless families had been served before taking plates for ourselves and getting in line. Since I had eaten a sandwich an hour ago, I wasn't too hungry. I asked for a little bit of turkey and some of the vegetables, intending to save room for dessert. Alice loaded up her plate, apparently starving. We sat together at the far end of the room, surrounded by families who lived at the shelter. There were 2 women who were clearly friends sitting side by side. Alice and I sat opposite, our hips nearly touching. On her other side, a 10-year-old boy eagerly dug into his turkey. On my other side, an older woman cut slices into bite-sized pieces for a toddler. The 2 women across the way giggled conspiratorially before turning their attention to us. "Are you 2 together?" one of them asked. "No," both Alice and I said quickly. "You look cute together," the second woman announced. "Thanks," I replied, glancing over at Alice. "The verdict is in." "I guess we have no choice." She popped a piece of squash into her mouth. My heart leaped to hear her joke about getting back together like that. It was a long way from an engagement ring, but it was something. I expected her to find a way to deny what was so obvious to these 2 young women, that we had history and that we belonged together. But she didn't. Instead, she took it in stride. I tried to capture her gaze, but she studiously avoided meeting my eye. I changed the subject by asking whether people preferred the mall Santa or the parade Santa. "I've never been to the mall Santa," the little boy said. "Well, you're in luck," I responded easily. "He's on his way here right now." That got Alice's attention, and she gave me a grateful smile.